I got you. Got you, Danny.
All right. All right. So we got a lot of people that
Failed to show.
yeah, a lot of people missing. A lot of people missing online too.
Everybody's sick. Yeah.
Okay.
Going around.
So if you missed last week, this is the YouTube channel that I'll put it on here so you guys can see it. That's the YouTube channel where you can pick up last week's class. And all right, does anybody have any questions from last week, what we went over?
Yeah, Danny, this is Dan. I got a
Dan.
question. Last week you talked about handouts. Are they going to be available to Zoomland?
Okay, so the handouts are, there's one of them that you could go online. You could either go to Grapevine or AA, and it's all it is a group inventory checklist.
Oh, okay.
So you could
Okay.
you could download that, and then the other one is if you download two of them, one you could change to whatever you want it to be: community, work, home. Okay. Then the other one with the healthy relationships, I'm going to take a picture of that and upload it sometime.
I already have it scanned, so. if
Oh, you
get
have it
their
scanned?
emails, Since you're in front of the computer, get their emails off the chat,
Okay.
and then I'll just include them in the email.
Oh, don't put your emails on the chat. Just send them to me, and I'll send them to you.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll put your emails
Thank you.
Yeah.
Danny, so I can send the PDFs. so you don't scan
Okay.
or anything, they're already in
I'll
digital
give it to
format.
you.
Yeah.
All right, so that'll take care of the 3 handouts that we have. All right. So last week we had people from Ireland and England here, but it's too late for them, so they must be sleeping tonight. But I have, so every Wednesday night, this class will be loaded up on here. So I loaded it up last week, and I've got I got a comment and a question. The comment was that I'm answering questions from you people without repeating the question, so they don't know what the question was. So actually, I got a job for you. Somebody asks you a question, just say what the question is there.
Okay.
All right, and that takes care of that. And the question they had was something that we didn't cover. So it's good if the more questions you have, the more stuff we'll cover, obviously. So somebody asked me online, what about throwing somebody out of the meeting? What about barring somebody or removing somebody from a meeting? Is that allowed? And that was the question that they asked. And that's
Danny,
a
you're
little
breaking up.
breaking up.
You're frozen.
Okay, hold on a minute here.
Was cool there.
Let's put this closer. Are we all right? Can you
Yes?
hear me now?
Yes?
Okay. So the question that was asked online this week was, what about throwing somebody out of a meeting, barring somebody from a meeting? Is that allowed? So we actually covered that without covering that specific question last week, going back to tradition 1. Okay. And what did we say? The main thing on tradition 1 was that the group is more important than the individual, right?
Mhm.
So if you have somebody that's in the rooms and they're disturbing the meeting, it's absolutely okay to remove them. Or call the police on them, whatever you have to do. It's absolutely okay to throw somebody out of a meeting. There's other situations that need a little more finesse. Like a lot of times you'll have guys, even with years of sobriety, and you may have a bunch of younger newcomer women come into the rooms and they're preying on them, right? That happens a lot. So you can't just throw them out of the meeting for that, but you need to talk to them. The the people in the group need, at a business meeting, if they're gonna discuss that, need to talk to the person, pull them aside, say, listen, you know, what you're doing is not okay, because it's happened many times before. A guy can ruin a meeting and just run all the women out of the rooms, you know. And you know, and the other thing is, what's the message to the women? These women are trying to get sober, trying to change their life, and what would the message that we're giving them is that it's no different than the streets in here, and you're not safe in here either, you know. So we have to look out for the group before an individual. So you talk to the person, you tell them that that's not okay, and if they keep up the behavior, then you just bar them from the meeting, not allowed to come. Simple. Okay. The reason I said a little more finesse, because this week we're on tradition 3. Okay. And tradition 3 says the only requirement for AA membership is a desire to stop drinking. And if you go to the long form in the back of the book, pay attention to this. This is what the long form says. Our membership ought to include all who suffer from alcoholism. Hence, we may refuse none who wish to recover. Nor ought AA membership ever depend upon money or conformity. Pay attention to that. Conformity, okay? So if somebody's not acting the way you think they should act, there's not a reason to bar them from a meeting. There's a difference between conformity and what's the best thing for the group. Any 2 or 3 alcoholics gathered together for sobriety may call themselves an AA group, provided that as a group they have no other affiliation. And later, when we get into the other traditions, we're going to learn the difference, because we cooperate with institutions and outside entities, but we don't affiliate with them. So there's a difference between cooperation and affiliation, and we'll talk about that in another tradition when we get down there. But just so you know that there's a difference between affiliating and cooperating. Okay. So the intent of this tradition then is that anybody's welcome in the room if they have a desire to not drink, right? And that's the only requirement. Last week we talked a little bit about, you know, women's meetings and men's meetings, and you know, used to be non-smoking. They had non-smoking meetings. They're all non-smoking today. But, you know, there's all different types of meetings. Like I said, you know, lawyers have a lawyer meeting, nurses have a nurse meeting, doctors have it. In the entertainment industry in Hollywood, they have their entertainment meeting. In the bigger cities, you have gay and lesbian meetings. They have transvestite meetings. There's all kinds of meetings because there's all kinds of people, right? I'll tell you a funny story. Years ago, I used to go to a meeting Sunday morning. This is before I moved out here. I used to go to a meeting on Sunday mornings in Lower Manhattan. It was in the Gay and Lesbian Building Center, the Gay and Lesbian Center. But it was a good meeting that I used to go to there. It was a regular meeting. And after our meeting, I forgot the time. It was like 10 o'clock, and then like 11:30, I think, was a meeting that the transvestites had, AA transvestite meeting. So they used the room after we did. And then I moved out here, and every time I went home, I would leave town before Sunday morning. And well, one time I was there for longer than that. So I got up Sunday morning. I was in the Bronx, and I said, I'm going to go down to the meeting now. You know, it was always a good meeting. And I drove all the way down Lower Manhattan, and I parked the car, and I ran up to and there was a sign on the door. The building had been condemned, but there was a sign that the AA meeting moved to another address. So I got in the car and I shot a few blocks away, and I found the address, and I was just a minute or two before the meeting started. And I found it. I ran following the signs in the building. I ran up a few flights of steps, and I went into the room, and I sat down, and I looked around, and everybody was in drag. I didn't know then until after the meeting was when they condemned the building. The meeting that I always went to closed, and the transvestite meeting took that spot in the new place. And so, yeah. And I was only a couple of years sober at the time, and I thought, oh, this is gonna be different. But I'll tell you what, the truth of the matter is, I closed my eyes and I listened to the people sharing, and it was a good damn meeting. It was a damn good meeting.
If it's a meeting that is for specific nurses, lawyers, whatever, can they actually call themselves an AA group?
Okay,
So the question was, if it was a meeting, what did you say? See, I know, like,
Specifically for example, nurses, lawyers, whatever.
yeah,
Can they call themselves an AA?
yeah, yes. The answer to that is yes. They absolutely can. And there's more than one tradition that says they can. But the reason that they can is because every group has we're going to do that next, really, autonomy, right? And what that really means is every group has the right to be wrong. Not that they're wrong, but every group does has the right to be wrong, as long as it's not affecting AA as a whole. But the reason that they can do that is that it's fine. Here's the difference, and I think we touched on this last week. If I walk into a woman's meeting and they say, I'm sorry, it's a women's meeting, and I say I have a desire not to drink, if they make me leave, then from that minute on, they cannot continue to be an AA group. So what they need to do is they need to take a group conscience, open the meeting, allow me to stay, and then after the meeting, tell me next week, here's a meeting schedule, or go here or go there, but this is a woman's meeting. If I come back again next week, they don't have to let me stay. But again, we always try to be all inclusive rather than exclusive.
Yes, if you're pertaining to an open AA, who is allowed to talk in open AA? Anyone? Or is it just alcoholics only?
I don't know what he said. I didn't hear him.
All right.
The whole question.
You're not much
I
help.
don't hear very well.
The question is, who can talk in an AA meeting? If it's an open meeting, can a non-alcoholic talk? Is that what you're asking? An open meeting means that it's open to anybody that not just necessarily alcoholic. Okay. So if the meeting is open to people that are not alcoholic, can they share? Yeah. Usually do they share? No. They're there to support somebody, But some people just like to hear themselves talk, even on topics they have no idea about. I know nobody relates to that, but yeah. But yes, technically yes. But again, it all depends on your chairperson, right? So you want to have a chairperson that could keep the meeting going in the right direction. Did you have something else? Oh, okay.
We've had students come in here in this meeting.
Yeah, we've had nurses come to meetings that are nurses in training, and they have to do some type of AA stuff, and they come and sit in a meeting, but they can't in a closed meeting. If it's a closed meeting, they're not allowed. If this closed meeting, your family support people are not allowed. It's a closed meeting, and there's a reason for that. People want to go to a meeting with just strictly people that are alcoholic. So, okay. So the thing then here with this tradition is, again, the only requirement for AA membership is a desire to stop drinking. So I don't know about you guys, but when I got sober, when I was dying, and I was like most of us, spiritually bankrupt, right? And I reached my hand out for help. And those that reached their hand out to help me, I didn't ask them what they did for a living. I didn't ask them how much money they had. I didn't ask them what their sexual preferences were. I asked for help, and they reached their hand out and they helped me. And that's what we do here. So now you're sober. I'm sure you went through the same thing, right? And now that you're sober, why would you even dream of questioning somebody else that's come in the room, of what their sexual preferences, what their religion is, what their beliefs are, what their politics are, and all that stuff. it's totally irrelevant. You know, or all alcoholics, if you're in the rooms and you have a desire not to drink, you're welcome. You know, when it comes to all these feelings and emotions, you know, doesn't matter where you come from and what you like or dislike or what you do. If it were possible to pick everybody's emotions out and put them in the middle of the floor and told you to go pick yours out, you wouldn't find yours from somebody else. And we all feel the same desperation and the same terror, and that's why we're seeking help, right? And it's your job as a recovering member of the fellowship to be there when somebody reaches out. And so that's the intent of this third tradition, is that we don't want to exclude anybody. And in the long form, it used the word conformity, right? So that's real important, because listen, if you go to a meeting and you love everybody in the meeting, you don't go to enough meetings. If you go to a meeting and you think like everybody else in the meeting, you certainly don't go to enough meetings, right? So the idea that there's so much difference between us is a good idea. It's a good thing. So I don't have to believe what you believe to be in here and to get sober and to change my life. I have to believe what this literature is telling me, and I have to practice that in my life. And beyond that, I don't have to do what you think, so I don't have to bend to your conformity, right? Now the group has bylaws, maybe, and the bylaws may say this and that, and most of that is a bunch of, you know, not really followed too well anyway. But the group has the right to say how they want a meeting to run. Okay. And going back to barring somebody from them, it's important to note that you're not barring them or kicking them out of AA. You're kicking them out of the May Club. You're kicking them out of a meeting in the May Club. They may come back to there's different groups that meet here, right? And in the Western Club, there's different groups that meet in the Western Club. And all of these clubhouses, there's different groups that meet in these clubhouses, most of them. So you're not kicking them out of AA. You're just telling them they're not allowed in your meeting. And so there's a big difference there, right? Because anybody that has a desire to not drink is welcome. Doesn't mean they're welcome in your meeting, but they're welcome in Alcoholics Anonymous. There's some group somewhere that'll put up with your shit. Yeah, just not here. Exactly. So anybody got any questions about that? Yes.
Why would you borrow somebody from a meeting?
Okay, she asked, why would you borrow somebody from a meeting? Because my
Why?
assistant flaked out on me.
I have an example, Dana.
Okay,
This was
Jenny's got an example.
This was years ago. There at one of the big clubhouses here. There was a gentleman that was exhibiting sexual predator behavior and disturbing and running off a lot of young women. The clubhouse banned that person from the clubhouse. And then, you know, suggested that he get help, and I think 3 or 4 years later took off the ban. Another thing would be, I've been in women's meetings where someone was asked to leave that had a child that was just disrupting the meeting so much that we couldn't hear ourselves think. So that's another example, and it was done very kindly, you know, but
Yeah, you know, there's a lot of meetings and clubhouses that have a daycare.
mhm.
Not a 24-hour daycare, but like a woman's meeting that have somebody dedicated to watch the kids in a separate room, because that's a big problem. You know, if you can't control your kid and the kid is disrupting the meeting, you know, you got to take the kid and go. So yeah, because again, that goes back to tradition 1, that the group is more important than any individual. So I know you want to be here, but so does everybody else, and nobody else is hearing anything because of the disturbance. So those are just a couple of reasons. There's sometimes, you know, I hear this a lot, and this is definitely not a reason. when people say, oh, he was drunk or he was stoned in the meeting. No shit, really? It's, wait a minute, are you saying that an alcoholic walked into a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous? That's absurd. So that is definitely not a reason to bar somebody from the meeting because they're drunk, unless they're acting out and disturbing the meeting. So the meeting is more important than the individual.
What about if they're doing it like continuously?
What if they're doing it continuously? See?
Sounds like an alcoholic.
Well, somebody needs to talk to them, and it shouldn't be one person, because then they point that person out as a figure of authority. So it should be the group's you know.
Consensus.
Yeah, but it should be the officers of the group. That at a business meeting that this is talked about and this person needs to be talked to, and then those people will approach this person and tell them, you have to check your behavior. And if they don't, then you gotta go.
Yeah.
You know,
Selling drugs in front of a meeting, in front of a clubhouse.
Well-
That should get you barred.
when I got sober in New York and we had a meeting in the Lower East Side in Alphabet City that I used to go to, and we were 2 stores in from the corner, and that was our meeting. And right on the corner, they were selling crack.
I mean, like that.
Yeah, well, basically that was in front of the meeting door. But, well, listen, we're not the police, and we can't, there's no AA police to call. But if somebody's doing something in the room, they
Yeah,
need,
trying to get people from AA or NA to go and do their drugs.
Yeah.
Very predatory.
well, yeah, so in that instance, you're not throwing out a member, you're throwing out a drug dealer.
Also stabbing somebody in front of.
Stabbing somebody is always not a good idea in a meeting.
In front of anywhere.
Stabbing I don't know, people frown on that stabbing shit, I don't know why.
I use the shoulder occurrence.
Huh?
Alphabet City, that's a normal occurrence.
Yeah, it is.
I was gonna say West
Well,
Boca
in
Raton,
the
that's where this
second
happened.
life-
That's a good area.
The second makeup, we had to get rid of a lady who was violent. This younger lady came in there ranting and raving. I don't know if she
Yeah.
juiced up or not, but she just had a little bit going on. And yeah, she punched somebody.
Yeah. Yeah. Mike?
I've got a little deal from the General Service Office about safety and common welfare. No AA entity proposes for any individual alcohol dealing with disruption. While most groups operate with a healthy balance of behavior and structure, there are a number of situations within group units challenge the safety of group individuals. Often that can center on disruptive individuals, those with confrontational or aggressive such behavior take over like two and long time members. Typically, the last person always have the option to call over the door with disruptive behavior. Was anyone safe?
Yeah. So the key thing there, Mike, is what you said at the beginning, is that we won't bar them from Alcoholics Anonymous. We bar them from our meeting. They have every right to go to another AA meeting, even in the same clubhouse. But they're just not welcome here.
And I think that a lot of people in Alcoholics Anonymous don't think they can call the police. And he mentioned calling the
Proper
appropriate.
authorities, yeah, the proper.
But I had that question, can we call the police? Is it
Absolutely, you
anonymous?
could call the
That kind of
police.
stuff.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely, that's what they're.
Yeah, you can absolutely
They're
call the
done.
police.
We
called the police a couple times.
Yeah,
Well, and that's what I was gonna say is like.
Well, by the time they show up, they're all
In,
done.
with this case, this individual, had come to the meeting, had preyed on people like in the late night meetings at this clubhouse. and was trying to sell drugs. And there were some women, there were some people in the neighborhood that were walking distance that were trying to get sober. And it was really hard because this person knew where to find people that were vulnerable and to sell to them. And so he would stand up and he would go and identify and go into meetings. And then that person ended up bringing gang violence into the clubhouse, and there was a stabbing outside of the meeting, outside of a noon meeting.
Yeah.
And so maybe that was the controversy in the clubhouse, was like, if we would have maybe gotten involved earlier with calling the police and barring this person
Yeah.
from the clubhouse, maybe somebody wouldn't have had so much harm
Yeah.
and trauma in an AA group,
Yeah.
right? Because there was 45 people that witnessed that. And
Yeah.
so-
And so, and that affects AA as a whole. Because, 2 years down the road, and that person is relaying that story, they're not gonna say it happened in this club, in this meeting. They're gonna say, when I went to AA, this is what happened,
Absolutely.
so, yeah, so that's bad. Okay. So how do we practice this tradition then? At work or at home? So for your personal relationship, you would say, 2 or more persons, when gathered together for mutual benefit, may call themselves a relationship. The only basic requirements for a good marriage or relationship is a mutual desire to be in that relationship and willingness to make it work. Okay. And you will get a copy. You'll get a copy of the healthy one. I'll make it. Oh yeah, that's right. So
Where is the yellow paper? Did it make it around to everybody?
okay.
I didn't get it. Anybody else need it?
So who's got a question on how you practice this at work? The only requirement at work is to be a member of the company. Okay, and going back to the first tradition again, the most important thing is what's best for the company. Okay, or what's best for the relationship, and so when you learn how to practice these traditions, what you're really learning is to practice unselfishness, because it's selfish to act out the way I always want to act out. And I have to think of my coworkers, I have to think of my family members, I have to think of, whatever the situation may be. And again, we talked about this last week. If I'm trying to not act out on my defects of character, then I am practicing the traditions. Right? That's the non-action part of this deal. The steps is the action, the traditions is the non-action, right? So I don't do these things that I want to do. Anybody got any questions on that? How to practice it at home or in a relationship?
I can see it in here, like at the May Club and the other ones and that. If someone came in, they had some problem or something, 2 of us would get up and talk to them outside. And
You're still on that? We're past that already.
yeah, no, but what I'm saying is, you're saying about in the workplace,
Uh.
a lot of them are office jobs and that. Well, you have the pecking order, whereas here it's even.
Yeah,
If you're concerned and for the betterment of the group, we were told to go out and see if we could help them, was what the deal was. Well, in the office situation, it's not,
no.
that's HR or
Well, yeah, but maybe you got a small company that don't have HR. It doesn't matter if you have the HR department or not. It's if you are practicing this in your life, then your job at your job is to be the best you can be for the company, because the company is the most important thing. And if it's at home, then your relationship is the most important thing. And so you have to practice unselfishness, which is what these traditions are asking us to do. That's what this is all about. That's the only reason Alcoholics Anonymous has survived all of these years and grown and prospered all of these years, because the groups as a whole has learned how to practice unselfishness. We don't do political stuff. We don't do, each one of us have our own political views, of course, but we don't, the group doesn't, so it doesn't matter what you do or whatever. in the group, it's about recovery. And if we need to stick to that. And at work, it's about how do I do the best job I can? You know, with what I got here.
It's a lot easier in here when everyone's kind of even, as opposed to them thinking you're ganging up or me trying to get another person to talk to my wife with me. That doesn't happen.
Well, and I think in the work situation, you know, I just look at it as an attitude of not taking it personal and giving them grace like we do in here. You know, we allow people to be exactly who they are
Uh-huh.
and don't take it personal. I don't need to retaliate. I don't need to exclude them. I just need to do my job, you know, and go on.
Right, but so if you can do that in here,
Yeah, why can't
why can't you do that at home?
Right.
If you can do that in here, why can't you do that in your job?
Because
know.
it's different.
They're different.
Yeah, well, so this is, home is the hardest place to practice this stuff, right? And work is probably second, and in here is probably the easiest. But if you learn how to practice in here, you can practice it anywhere, if you're willing to. So last week we said that if I practice the steps, right, then what I'm doing then is I'm protecting myself from you. And if I practice the traditions, what I'm doing in actuality is protecting you from me, because I'm trying not to act out my defects of character, right? And so, and that's it. And that's what it's all about. That's what all these traditions are about, is to learn how to practice unselfishness. Because I don't know if you agree with me or not, but we're pretty selfish people, alcoholics, right? Yeah. So we want to smash that and do something different. Okay. What else we got? Anybody else? No?
When I think of it, when I try to think of it like at first, it's like thinking like, for better or for worse, like it or not, we're on the same team. Right? Like I may not like all of my coworkers, but we are all on the same. Just like I may not like every AA member, but we're all on the same team trying to do this.
Yeah.
We kind of adopt it.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, anybody else? Okay. Tradition 4.
Say 5 weeks? 'Cause it's 3 weeks.
Excuse me?
I said, did you say 5 weeks? It was looking like 3 weeks.
No, we're only on 4. Might be 5 weeks. Could be 4, could be 6. Depends on questions. Okay, tradition 4. Each group should be autonomous, except in matters affecting other groups or AA as a whole. Now that's a good Scrabble word, autonomous. It's a big, long syllables, but it really just means simply separate.
Are we doing long form again or just
Yeah, I was gonna do the long form. So the long form on tradition 4 says, it's on page 189 in your book. With respect to its own affairs, each AA group should be responsible to no other authority than its own conscience. But when its plans concern the welfare of neighboring groups also, those groups ought to be consulted. And no group, regional committee, or individual should ever take any action that might greatly affect AA as a whole without conferring with the trustees of the General Service Board. On such issues, our common welfare is paramount. Okay, so when it says that with respect to its own affairs, each AA group should be responsible to no other authority than its own conscience. We talked about that last week in tradition 2. That God speaks loud and clear in the group conscience only when there's a discussion on all issues, when the minority is heard too, you know, and you don't rush a vote through, you know, let's have a dance, everybody, yeah, everybody, okay, we'll have a dance, and nobody talked about not having a dance. God doesn't speak in that group conscience. That's not God that spoke. That's you guys that usually the people with the loudest mouth and talk a lot. They're the ones that get that shit passed through. Certainly not God. Okay, so God will speak clearly in the group conscience when all sides of an issue are discussed. Okay, when all sides of an issue, the minority especially, there may be, if you take a vote and everybody raised their hand except for 2 people, but they don't, and they say who's opposes, and they don't even raise their hand, right? Because they don't want to raise their hand because they're way outnumbered. So the chairperson should ask them if they would speak for the minority opinion and hear what they have to say. And then again, we talked about this last week, but it's worth mentioning again, that this is nothing that has to be done right here, right now. If there's not, if there's some doubt as to if we're doing the right thing or not sure, or some people, too many people maybe not for it, but it's a little minority. It's not a great, it's a little majority. It's not a great majority. Table it. Just table it to the next meeting. And then everybody could go do whatever homework they need to do and come back to the meeting, and you can have a much more well-informed conscience. And then God speaks clear in that, right? So when we're talking about this now, we're talking about, so we're assuming now, having said all that, now we're on tradition 4, and we're assuming that the conscience of the group was a well-informed conscience, and that God did speak in there because all sides of an issue were discussed. Okay. Now, if that be the case, then they have the right to do whatever they want to do. The group have the right to do whatever they want to do. They have the right to be wrong. They have the right to do something not great, not good. They have that right. Hopefully, you'll learn from your mistakes. That's how we got these traditions to begin with. When all the groups started making all these rules and stuff, right? That's what happened. They figured, we need to get this more under control here so we don't fall apart from everybody's great ideas. Because, people in general, but especially alcoholics, we got great ideas. I don't know about you, but anything I think is a great idea. If I thought it must be a good idea, right? So, yeah, so you need to conform to my great idea. The problem is you're thinking something too, and you think that your idea is a great idea, and I need to conform to your idea. You see where all the bumping heads and the problems come in? And that's why these traditions are here, to help us stay together and grow spiritually. Grow. All right. So, anybody got any questions on this here? So there's 2 major factors here, or rules that for a group, right? One is that a group ought not do anything which would injure AA as a whole, and it ought not affiliate itself with anyone. So those are 2 kind of basic rules to have a group, because it says any 2 people can get together and form a group, right? But you form a group, that ought not do anything which would injure AA as a whole or affiliate yourself with anyone. Give you an example. Go ahead.
Oh, yes, this is an example of what would injure AA, like maybe molesting.
Okay, and it's maybe injure is not the perfect word, but I'm going to give you an example that maybe will help you see it more clearly. Years ago, there was a Sunday night meeting, and they called themselves the it was a CA meeting. They called themselves the Sunday night CA. Oh no, they held it at a church. They called them Sunday night Sacred Heart meeting. Sunday night Sacred Heart meeting. That was the name of the group. So we went there and we said, you can't do that, because that's an affiliation. You're affiliating CA or AA with Sacred Heart Church. Or if you have it, let's say you have it in the crisis center, or what's that place on class in there? TRC, right? So let's say we have a meeting there, so, and we want to call our group the the AA TRC meeting. No, you can't do that, because that's an affiliation. And when later, when we get to the later step, the later traditions, we'll talk more about that. But that affects AA as a whole. Because now you're putting a Catholic church with AA. And what happens if a Muslim walks in the room and wants to be a member? What happens if a Jewish guy walks in the room and wants to be a member? What happens if a Buddhist walks in, or a Hindu, or whatever, right? What happens if a non-believer, an atheist walks in the room? So we don't affiliate ourselves with religion, and that's what, if you're calling yourself the Sunday night Sacred Heart meeting, that's a direct affiliation.
Is that because you called it that?
Well, that was the name of the group.
Because I've been to, especially in Europe.
Yeah, and you know how easy we fixed that? It's a Sunday group. We dropped the Sacred Heart from it, and
But that's just because of its style.
yes,
Because I know, especially in Europe, the little church halls and that.
right. Well, but the group, a lot of meetings in Europe have meetings in churches.
Yeah.
But the group is not the name of the church. It's a so-and-so group meeting at the Presbyterian Church of whatever, right? That's different. That's not an affiliation. That's cooperation. Now, what do we mean by, and we'll get into this again later with the other traditions, but just real quickly, what do we mean by the difference between cooperation and affiliation? Is we're not conforming to, I'm gonna read something to you. I got any of my Florida friends here? So when I went to Florida, when I moved to Florida, there's a guy and his wife, 2 AA members, they bought a building. And they wanted to use the building just to rent out to AA groups, right? So I went and sat down with them. I wanted to start a meeting. And they said, okay, so we get, I forgot what they said, 25 or 30% of the basket, the 7 tradition basket. And I said, no, you don't get none of that. Just tell me how much you want for rent. And he said, well, everybody's paying, everybody that's got a meeting here is giving us 25% of the basket. I said, and everybody, just because everybody's doing it, don't make it right. It's wrong. You don't get nothing out of the 7th tradition. That's AA money. Yeah. So I said, if that's the case, I won't do a meeting here. And they wanted me to do the meeting there. So he said, oh, I swear you, the guy said this to me. He said, do me a favor, don't tell the other groups. And I think he charged us like $15 a night to use we only had one night a week there. So that was going along for about a year or two. And then the guy that was the chairperson for the group was the guy I was sponsoring. And he got this letter from them. And so they said, hello, Mark, that's my sponsor's name. I would like to take this opportunity to share a few things with you. First, we would like to get some members from each group to commit some time to do a deep spring cleaning here at the warehouse. Since the first day of summer is coming up soon, we will need to drop a date on this by next weekend. Please mention this to your group members and I'll work on the details this weekend. We would also like to create and adapt a space where each group picks an area here in the club and is responsible for maintaining its cleanliness on a daily or weekly basis, similar to Adopt a Mile program on the city roads. We have signs made to show where your support is. Then remember, this will reflect your group. So he came to me and he said, what do I do with this? They sent me this email. And I said, here's how we're going to answer this. So this is what I answered them with. I think I was very polite. Yeah. No, I was. This was my answer to them. I said, hi, Chrissy. That was the lady's name. I have a few questions if you don't mind. Does the warehouse have a board of directors or a members committee? Most clubhouses around the country set up a foundation and they have paying members who pay a small monthly fee to support their club. These members have voting rights to the function and purpose of the club. They hire and pay for things that need to get fixed or stay clean on a regular basis. I personally, and some of us others probably, would not mind joining the foundation, but to ask our group to do these things is not something we would entertain. The group's only purpose is to carry the message, not to adopt the space or clean buildings. The group, we certainly want to clean up after our meeting, but an AA group doesn't get involved in matters of money, property, or prestige. This is not anything that we would put on our agenda for our business meeting. If you posted some flyers around the warehouse and a member read it and wanted to personally help, that's fine. Please keep us informed. And if you need any information on foundations, I have experience in starting a few of them, and I'll be glad to help you. That was nice, right? Yeah. So, in other words, I said, fuck you and your adopt the space. We ain't doing that shit. We ain't.
Yeah.
What they respond.
I don't have their response, but no, it was just a quick like thank you and you know. So that's how we cooperate with the building. We follow their rules, but we don't do their cleaning for them. That would be an affiliation, doing that, going that far. Adopt the space. All right, we'll clean this room. Yeah, I don't think so. So you got to watch out. I mean, like if you go to a church, they might have rules and you have a meeting there, and you have to conform to those rules. Okay, going back years ago, there was a meeting in a sober living facility. And the sober living facility, this meeting was a good meeting, and it was a big meeting. And the lady that was running the sober living facility didn't like the person that was chairing the meeting. So they started telling them what they needed to do in the meeting. And it suggested that they needed to put this person as the chairperson and that. And so they came to us and they said, what should we do? And I said, tell them to go fuck themselves. You can't do that, And so the meeting had two choices. They can convert themselves to an H&I meeting and conform to whatever that facility was telling them to do, or close the meeting. And they chose to close the meeting.
I'm sorry, I was throwing the basket. Did you say they told them who to have chair the meeting?
Yes.
Holy man.
Yeah. Yeah. It was all about personalities, the lady running the place and the guy that was chairing the meeting. It was bad.
So I had an experience with that Jordan's Crossing years ago. There was a group, and I'm sure people are still taking care of it. They came to us and said, we don't like how you run the meetings. We want you to enforce all these rules. If anybody doesn't share, you have to report them. We want you to follow this and that format. Can't cuss. I mean, they just have this list of rules. And so I took that dilemma to my sponsor, who has a lot of tradition experience, and she said, here's your choice. You fight back and my initial reaction was, this is an AA meeting. I'm bringing an AA meeting here, so I don't think I can do all this. But she said, you can switch it over to an H&I meeting and then continue or stop going, stop the meeting. So what I ended up sitting down and talking with them, and they ended up switching it over to an H&I because they needed that. And so in the meeting, I would just open it up, telling them this is not an AA meeting.
Yeah.
We have this set of rules. This is their house. I'm coming into their house.
Yeah.
I have to follow their rules.
Well, there's a lot of treatment facilities that we bring meetings to and each of them have their own set of rules. And so what you're doing there is you're bringing a meeting there under the ninth tradition. Okay. It's a committee. So we have the right to set up committees under the ninth tradition. And one of the committees we set up is an H&I committee. And that's hospitals and institutions, right? So when we set that committee up, we make them deal with these institutions. And again, they all have their own list of what they want and what has to be. If we're gonna go in their house and be their guest, we cooperate with them. But we do not affiliate with them. So that's where you draw the line. And if you didn't want to do that, then she gave you the same two answers I gave them. Make it an H&I meeting or close the meeting. They chose to close the meeting. There was a lot of personalities going back and forth between the chairperson and the person running the place. So, you know, okay. Huh? All right. So how do we practice this at home and at work? So each partner should be autonomous except in matters affecting the other partner, the family, or the relationship as a whole. So this is important because this happens way too often in relationships. And any of you that have been through my relationship workshop, you've heard me share this before. When you have a relationship, you really have three different parties, right? Speaking from my perspective, it would be her and her shit, me and my shit, and us and our shit, right? And the secret is the hard part is learning what's my shit and what's her shit, right? If it's our shit, then we could work on it together. If it's her shit, I need to leave it alone. It ain't my shit, right? Yeah, it ain't my shit, so I ain't got, I got to step back from that. So the autonomy here is that each of us are separate. And I've shared this before and also in the workshop years and years ago. God, probably 30 years ago. I was a year or two sober, and I went to a wedding, a Catholic wedding back in New York. And they had this beautiful ceremony in the church where the bride and the groom, there was a candle lit. They took the candle. They each took their candle and they met in the middle of the altar and they lit one candle and then they blew out their candle. And I was just overwhelmed sitting there thinking, oh my God, they just blew out their individuality. Because the loving thing, everybody was crying and shit, it's like, oh, the two of us are now becoming one. No, we're not. There's not one person in a relationship, there's three. Right? Her, me, and us. And individuality is important in a relationship. And that's what the autonomy here that we're talking about. We're talking about each person in the relationship is their own separate entity. Now, the important thing is the relationship, right? Go back to tradition one. The most important thing is the relationship, but we have we're our own people. We're not one. We're two separate people trying to enjoy life together. That's important. And that's what this tradition, if you're having problems at home, this tradition is powerful to apply to that because it's autonomous. You're autonomous. You're separate. Okay? That's what the autonomy is here. And the same thing at work applies, right? You apply the same thing at work. That each person is just a worker, a co-worker, and the most important thing is the company, right? So, and anybody got any questions on that? Does all that make sense to you?
So Danny, you're saying, so each is equal towards the relationship.
Well, the relationship is the most important thing, right? Now, what is my part? So if I'm going to try to practice unselfishness, right? The reason I'm practicing unselfishness is to enhance the important thing, which is the relationship, right? So if I'm trying not to act out on my defects of character, I'm trying to protect my partner from me, right? And therefore, I'm practicing the traditions. And that we're two separate people. We're not lighting one candle and becoming one person and blowing out our individuality. We're two separate people trying to share a life. So the important thing is the relationship. And then we look at what's you and your shit and me and my shit and us and our shit. Sometimes it's you. Sometimes it's me. Sometimes it's us. You know, which one is it? Okay. But, and so sitting down, communication, all that other stuff is important. But yeah, I think the most important thing is the group. The most important thing is the family. The most important thing is the company. And now what's my part in the group? What's my part in the family? What's my part in the business? And that's the best way to look at it.
I think just, I've been thinking about that in a different way, and now the tradition, it's kind of bringing it to the surface a little bit. I was thinking, like, my husband, I would consider him an Al-Anon, because I don't think he showed the characteristics of like being an alcoholic or whatever. I quit drinking, and he's drinking, and he doesn't care, and he doesn't eat meetings, and he hangs out with his friends, and it's just not. I mean, I don't know what that is. But
you quit drinking, he got a lot better.
Yeah.
Ain't that something?
I mean, I don't.
100 people around me got well when I quit.
Yeah. But that autonomy, like if he was somebody that, like, let's say that's just for now, right? I'm 8 months sober, but let's say in 3 years he starts drinking and he starts showing all of those things. I think that is an issue a lot for couples, that, you know, the autonomy of that, this is my own recovery, and that's somebody else's recovery, and we're autonomous in that. I think that's really where it like is a struggle in AA and in relationships, when that autonomy is sobriety and recovery.
Yeah. When you have a man and a woman, a husband and a wife, and the husband gets sober, and now he's taking control of life back and family back again, it's tough, and it works better than if the wife is the alcoholic, then got sober, and now more families break up that are the husband was the sober person and the wife was the alcoholic, then vice versa.
So I have a different question. As a
We were
practical
doing it,
matter,
Huh?
you find yourself wanting to be controlling to the other partner,
Uh-huh.
and this is a characteristic of both women and men. What do you do in your mind? Pray? Is there a thing you say to yourself?
So the question is, if you find yourself to be controlling in a relationship, what do you do? Well, hopefully, when you work the steps, you take care of that stuff. Okay? So these things should all become, these are all part of the things that are should be on your 6-step list, right? And you're working the steps, and you know, you understand you have control issues. So you're practicing you know, the opposite of that. And so I don't think it's right to say what happens when you're trying to control a situation if you've been sober for a while and you're working these steps. Because if you've been sober for a while and you're working these steps, you really should not have control issues. Now, everybody's got them to a degree, but really the steps address all of that. I mean, the 3rd step talks about the first requirement is that we be convinced that any life run on self-will could hardly be a success. That's the first requirement for the 3rd step. And it says it right in the book, verbatim. The first requirement is that we be convinced that any life run on self-will could hardly be a success. So if I'm still trying to control shit, I'm running my life on self-will. I'm not practicing the step.
And to your point, you say that the tradition is non-action, and so the applicable thing of tradition
Is to not control.
Is to not control.
Yeah.
Well,
To no action.
but so what I was gonna say is we're extremists.
Okay.
And so I don't look at it as trying to control, but submitting. Right? And so that's just as unhealthy
Yes.
as going the other way. And I
Yeah.
think just to make that point is that when we're talking about autonomy and my autonomy, it's not just that I stop trying to control, but I stop giving away everything.
Yeah.
Then,
Well, yeah, there
Well,
could,
isn't the goal to be okay in spite of what everybody?
well, but that goes back to how do you control somebody? You control somebody 2 different ways, through dependency or through outright aggression, right? So I can control you either way. If you got to do everything for me, because I'm so meek and helpless.
Or I give up.
That's
what I
control.
believe.
Yeah.
That's a
Yeah.
good point.
All right. We're done for this week.
Okay.
Same time, same channel next week. Thank you.
The yellow paper.
Let me see.
Oh,
Oh, you hit?
I hit pause, so I hit pause again. I started it.